Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, personal finance, and most recently, Bitcoin mining related. Now in today's video, we've welcomed back our resident analyst, Anthony Power. We're going to be dissecting January production results from Bitfarms and TeraWulf. And on top of that, you guys, we just got some news out from Hut 8 Mining and Marathon in relation to one of their hosting agreements, which also includes a juicy termination payment. Now, all of that upcoming in today's video, but before we get into it, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a huge help to myself, Anthony, and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comment section below what you thought about these initial January production results, which of the miners is your favorite moving into this year's halving event, and your prediction in terms of Bitcoin price for the big halving this April. Now, with that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, so that's right. Today's video, you've got myself and Anthony Power back to talk about some big production results from the first month of 2024. And in addition to that, we've got some drama out between Marathon and Hut 8 Mining in relation to a hosting agreement that we're going to get Anthony to walk us through towards the end of the video. So Anthony, welcome back, and a lot to cover in today's presentation.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome, buddy. So first, Bitfarms is always very consistent and usually very punctual getting their production results out for the prior month. This month was no different, so kicking the year off in style, we've got Bitfarms coming out with their January 2024 production result. Now, Anthony, we just covered transaction fees in our last video talking about how Bitcoin mining companies actually earn money through their pure play mining divisions. And a big focus of that was transaction fees. And we've now seen those drop off considerably from the levels we saw in December, obviously impacting production for these miners. So why don't you give us an update on Bitfarms numbers and the impact you've seen here with these reduced transaction fees?
Yeah, so yeah, as you rightly say, every month, month after month, Bitfarms get their update out first of all the public listed miners. And, yesterday was no different from other previous months. So January, we knew that the transaction fees were a lot lower, have access to some of the miners' wallets. It wasn't an extreme shock when Bitcoin announced they only mined 357 Bitcoin in the month of January. And when you compare that to what they mined in December, they mined 446 in December. So, quite a significant difference. But that decrease, of 20%, it really was about, two parts. One was about the lack or the size of the additional fees as part of the rewards, but also the fact that there was some, winter storms across the North America, which brought down, more curtailment from some of these miners, and therefore, less production. So 357 in a month. They're still operating at the 6.5 exahash, but because of the curtailment, their actual operating hash rate, so this is the average operating hash rate throughout the month, was about 5.9 exahash. And in terms of operational hash rate, that's been fairly consistent for about the last 3 or 4 months, at 5.8, 5.96. It's around about that mark. So they're not able to fully operate all the way through the month at their 6.5 exahash, normally about 10% down. That average a day is still, 11.5 Bitcoin a day, and that still brings in close to $500,000 a day in revenue. So still, good numbers. I mean, the price of Bitcoin at the end of January was 43,000. At the end of December, it was 42,265. So, $750 in price difference at the end of January. So we've seen that Bitcoin price continue to rise month after month now for about the last 13 months, effectively. So Bitcoin price is still going up, production down, and they give us an update about what's going to be happening at some of their facilities. So they're obviously growing out the Paraguay facility. It's an aggressive growth plan, and they hope to get to their target, which we alluded to on previous podcasts, of 12 exahash in the first half of this financial year. By the end of June 2024. And then hopefully they can get to 21 exahash in the remaining 6 months as well, because they've got orders in to get them to at least 17 exahash. And we know that they will have some machines that they may be able to reutilize and get that extra 4 exahash as well. So it's an ambitious target of 21 by the end of the year. It means they're going to have to increase, their current hash rate by another 200%. Now, that can happen. We saw Iris do an increase by 200% in 2023, and we saw CleanSpark do it in 2022. So miners can grow, but we're talking, this is sustained growth. This is growing on top of growth. So this will be interesting to see, how quickly it can get to their initial target of 12. Bear in mind, they set a target of, 6 or 7 exahash by the end of 2022, and we're still sort of like not quite at 7 in 2024. So, still work to do, but they've got the team to deliver, and the orders are in place, and the sites are there, and they obviously like Paraguay. I mean, still get a lot of social media about the political situation down there can turn on the sixpence. But they've done the due diligence. They've gone down there. They're actually performing down there. Marathon are also in Paraguay, so there's 2 big miners down there. They won't just walk into these places without doing some due diligence. Another strong update in terms of what miners could have done in January, and we have seen that sort of like that global hash rate just pull off a little bit. Because the transaction fees aren't as high, it means some of those miners that were less profitable are not switched on at the moment because they were relying on the transaction fees to take them over the profit level. And with that not happening, we've seen the global hash rate pull back. I think it was like 520 yesterday. So it had reached, getting on for 700, when times were good in December, when everyone was able to switch on, pretty much irrespective of what type of machine you were using, because the 20+% in transaction fees made it more profitable to do that. But January, Bitfarms tend to set the story, so we'll see a lot of these miners have a reduced production based on what they did in December, and that 20% is a big difference. Yeah.
Yeah, it most definitely is. We talked about 5 ways companies can prepare or get ready for the halving in yesterday's video. And 2 of the big ones were low-cost energy, which Bitfarms has definitely secured south of the border there in South America, and also fleet efficiency. And we've seen them produce that big purchase order. I actually asked Jeff Morphy on why they ended up in South America out of the gate, Anthony, a few interviews ago. And he said, I think he said, don't quote me on this, but one of the initial directors or something like that had some family connections in South America. So it kind of ended up by chance. And now, exactly right, the political environment there has changed. It's so welcoming to Bitcoin. It really looks like they had a lot of foresight there. So that's going to be one we're eagerly watching. And you rightfully said, Anthony, Bitfarms has kind of set the pace. TeraWulf just came out as well, just over 300 Bitcoin, I think they mined for the month. So definitely down month over month. Why don't we get into that one now?
Yeah, so if you look at December's output for TeraWulf, they've mined 334 using their 5 exahash of self-mining capacity. They brought out some good updates in the last couple of days. Today they announced their production update, and they the number was down on what was produced in December. So they produced 313 Bitcoin at a rate of just over 10 per day. One thing that stood out in their update was actually the creep now in the energy cost to mine Bitcoin, because TeraWulf have been fairly consistent throughout 2023. I mean, they've got a great facility, the Nautilus site there, the nuclear facility, where they're able to mine, probably nearly half of their capacity in December was mined with nuclear power at about 2 cents a kilowatt hour, and the remaining hash rate is mined more at the market rate. And when we look at the blended rate for December, I haven't got the number in front, but I think it's about 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. When we look at the blended rate for January, and whether this is because of the weather, it's now at 5 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's a significant increase in the actual cost of energy. And we talked about this on our podcast yesterday about, the most important parts of preparing for the halving, this being probably one of the most significant. If you can't afford new machines, and you haven't got some of the other attributes that you require, you want to get the cheapest energy that you can possibly contract to. And so them highlighting that, and credit to TeraWulf and I think Iris Energy that they're generally, and SATO Technologies, they actually announce on their updates how much it costs to mine a Bitcoin. So it'll be interesting to see from other miners who also announce what their price is. But for TeraWulf, it was, the actual cost to mine their self-mined Bitcoin was about $16,700 per coin.
And that's power cost, Anthony, or that's all
that's
in?
Just the power. That's just the power cost itself. Yeah. So, but actually, that number itself, it does exclude any benefits they receive from demand response or ancillary services revenue. So, demand response means that they actually switch off and they get benefits from doing that. And also ancillary service are if they sign up to an agreement where they will curtail at certain times of the day to make sure the domestic supplies aren't diminished, and that people can have their breakfast and evening meal without having to worry about where the electricity is coming from. Miners do benefit from signing up to them sort of deals because at the end of the day, mining companies are out there to try and use the energy that's not utilized 24 hours of the day, but they appreciate at the times it is utilized, they can switch off these machines. And we've said before, these machines, even these big sites, can be turned off in a matter of seconds and switched on in a matter of seconds. And other industries can't compete with that. So the mining companies are really good. There's only a few times of the day, Bryce, when actually the energy supply is really required. So it is around that breakfast morning and it is around sort of like early evening. And outside of those times, generally, unless it's a real cold snap or equal in the summer, a real hot snap where there's a lot of air conditioning used, generally the power requirements are reduced. So there is a significant amount of power. And these Bitcoin mines can go into these, into areas, utilize that power. That revenue goes back into companies, goes back into circulation, and, taxes are paid on that power and money comes back in that way. So there's a lot of benefits from the Bitcoin miners. And we don't always see that, that story being told. We always see is that, the last thing I read the other day was, Bitcoin mining uses the same amount of power as Norway, a European country. And, if you don't then turn around and say, how much of that power is renewable energy? So wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, a big portion of that. I'm going to say, at the last, at the mining summit that headed up by Michael Saylor, I think we were over 60% of global mining now is utilizing renewable energy. So not the bad picture that some people want to portray all the time. So an interesting point. But we know that TeraWulf also, they sell their Bitcoin, so they don't have a hodl, whereas Bitfarms, they actually sold their whole production for the month of January and retained a hodl of about 804 Bitcoin. So TeraWulf sold their hodl. But the other good news that they had this month was actually they were able to increase their hash rate by, we told, I think at the last update, that building 3 at Lake Mariner was completed. And during the month of January, they would be installing and switching on their new machines going into that facility. And, the company purchased, about 2.8 exahash of the S19 XPs. And many of those have been installed yesterday. The company put out a big update yesterday that they've been installing and finished the installation there. And, so when we get the February update in February, we will see that the company, I think at the moment their hash rate's at 7.2, and at the end of February it'll be at their planned growth hash rate of 7.9. So that's a big move for TeraWulf. That then sort of like puts them, ahead of their peers in Bitfarms, in Iris Energy, in Cipher, in Bitdeer, in terms of that sort of that middle tier, aiming to get towards where CleanSpark are, and CleanSpark are at 10, and that's the next target for TeraWulf. So it'll be interesting. They've made good on their promise to get 7.9. There's an aspiration to get to 10. We had Nazar Khan on the channel recently, and he gave a good update of where the company are. So this is just news supporting what he was saying literally just over a week ago. So yeah, it's a good update. Not as many Bitcoin as we all expected, but again, it's down to transaction fees and also down to the sort of like, we have had some bad weather in January, which has affected production for a number of miners.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the grid stability too, Anthony, because That narrative is definitely one that we want to promote and want to talk about. You're right, a lot of that power is renewable and a lot of it would otherwise be wasted. And that's exactly what we talked about with Soluna the other day and some of their renewable capture projects at solar farms and stuff like that, or such as that. And the other thing I thought you brought up there that was super interesting, you talk about the transaction fees plus or minus 20%. You talk about this exponential growth, doubling on top of doubling on top of doubling of fleet sizes. And then the Bitcoin price, it's no wonder this industry and share price is so volatile, right? And a lot of times we get questions, oh, well, Bitcoin price is up, miners are down, or vice versa. But there's so many undercurrents in this in this ocean of Bitcoin mining. Or pool, I'll use, of Bitcoin miners, Anthony, that it's really difficult to sometimes see what's actually driving the share price one way or another in a given day. So great updates. Congratulations. I saw the tweet from TeraWulf stacking and racking the last miner there. So that's awesome. And it'll be exciting to watch that one throughout the year as well. Now, quick update, guys. We're going to continue to give updates on January production results next week as they come out. We also got a subscriber request to go through some of the calculations and definitions in terms of Anthony's metrics and tables that we presented yesterday and in our monthly review last month. So we'll do that as well. We're really interested in providing these education pieces. So if you guys have any questions about the halving, transaction fees, calculations, efficiency, anything like that, leave them in the comment section. We're more than happy to walk through that and help you guys kind of connect the dots. And I'm sure I could use a refresher on a few of them too, Anthony. Now, final piece of news here. This one's got a couple elements to it, a couple of faces. So long story short, Marathon and HUD 8 have updated their hosting agreement. There's some termination fees involved. There's some new entrants or players involved. So Anthony, I'm going to let you kind of unwind this one for us, but definitely an interesting development considering we talk about both of these companies on the channel quite a bit.
Yeah. So yesterday we heard the news from Marathon, and it was reiterated by HUD 8 today in terms of what was happening with the two sites at Kearney in Nebraska and Granbury in Texas. So these are the two sites that Marathon purchased last month, totaling about 390 megawatts of power. HUD 8 are the sort of like the resident management company there managing the site. And now that Marathon have purchased those sites, they've actually given notice to HUD 8. They want to sort of like, we alluded to this in a previous podcast, that, you know, having gone down and looked at infrastructure, Marathon were then starting to look at actually controlling their own destination, and doing that would be having their own structure under their own control. So, you know, it wouldn't have made sense for Marathon to purchase those sites and then keep a host management company in place on their behalf if they were looking to try and drive down the cost of mining a Bitcoin. And the cost for them of mining Bitcoin prior to these sites was effectively the energy cost and the hosting fee on top of the energy cost. So, you know, where we talk about some of the miners paying, you know, 4 cents, or in case now TeraWulf 5 cents. It'd be interesting if other miners update us on what they're paying in the month of January. But I would imagine they're paying at least 5 cents in some locations. If TeraWulf are certainly doing that, having some of their hash rate at 2 cents a kilowatt hour on a fixed rate, that would be interesting to hear. But Marathon were paying 6.7 cents a kilowatt hour as a hosted and energy fee in 2023. And, you know, having taken those sites now and having the size of that company, being able to negotiate probably reasonably good terms with a power company, you know, you'd expect that cost to come down considerably. So there's no real shock to them doing that. There is, you know, that they've given notice, and the actual contract will finish or finalise on April the 30th, 2024. So there's another 3 months of that contract to run. At which point, HUD 8 will obviously leave the site, and post that, within the next 30 days, they get a termination fee of about $13.5 million. So that's part of the contract as a termination fee. Now, that sounds like, you know, oh, it's you know, what HUD now going to do? But actually, HUD have also released another update, and effectively, this comes out of the Celsius bankruptcy. Another Bitcoin mining company has been created, and they're called Ionic Digital, and they operate at Cedar and Hut have just announced a 4-year agreement to manage their operations in Texas. So, you know, they've come out of one deal and automatically there's another deal on the table for them to do that. So they're a specialized, you know, if you look at what, you know, Hut previously, US BTC, managing big sites, very, very big sites. I think, you know, before the loss of this site to Marathon, they had, you know, I think like 900 megawatts of service sites there. So, you know, they've now got the deal with Ionic to take on their sites, and that deal is expected to reach 240 megawatts. So, you know, a good size site there. Cedar will have 127,000 miners on the site, which gives them a hash rate of about 12 exahash. So that puts them as a mining company automatically sort of in that sort of top tier miners. So we'll hear more about what they're going to be doing shortly as they probably start releasing their results. Hut 8 have disclosed that they stand to earn about $81.5 million with actual potential to earn more than that during the contract. And it's also secured some some equity interest in the company, acquiring shares and rights, and they've appointed a director. And so, yeah, so that's a sort of like a positive news to sort of like, you know, to help with the news from Marathon, you know, literally the same day that came out. So it's a good news. It doesn't mean that, you know, Hut 8 is going to start losing their business. They've gained another business straight away, and you know that sort of like stands out. We now know more about this new miner, Ionic. So, you know, come to the table. We talked about Swan, I think, last week in a podcast about them emerging with a hash rate of 4, potential to go to 8. Well, here's one coming out with 12 exahash potentially. So they're going to be a big player in the space. And it'd be interesting to see how that develops there. But yeah, so it's sort of like, you know, a good news story to offset some of the, you know, what some shareholders might think is, you know, obviously loss of revenue for the hosting that they were, management service they were providing at those 2 sites for Marathon.
Yeah, it's a good point. As you bring up some of these new entrants or emerging companies, I would imagine that continues if and when this bull cycle really takes off. And a lot of people have asked, are we forgetting certain companies from our discussion? It's not necessarily the case. We just don't have bandwidth to cover them all. So again, leave in the comment section if there's 1 or 2 companies that you'd like more info on, and we're happy to share. Great news. Great way to end the week. It's Friday afternoon here, you guys, so have a great weekend. We're sure to get more mining results, more production results out early next week. So you'll be seeing Anthony and I again. That's all for now. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next video.